Good day, everyone. We are the Group 4, and our topic is all about Asian ethical traditions. Learning outcomes. At the end of this chapter, you should be able to articulate the basis for ethical behavior for Buddhism, analyze how the concept of the oneness of all things in the Brahma serves as a basis for moral behavior, and examine how Confucianism founds ideal human behavior in the ideas of Ren and Li. Many people in the Philippines are deeply influenced by or have great commonalities in their ethical ways. One of the most common similarities that Filipinos have is with their culture. Most Filipinos practice Christianity, and this is evident in the number of churches found in every corner of cities and even remote barangays. Another reason for this is that it was introduced to them during colonization by these Spaniards. This made them believe that all Filipinos are Christians, which is not true because many are still practicing their indigenous beliefs. However, it still affected Philippine society's morals, values, and practices today. There are three commonalities in the ethical ways of Filipinos. The first is, one believes that if they do bad things, they could be victims of misfortune because of karma. Filipinos believe in karma because it is the foundation of their way of life, which they carry throughout generations. We believe that what goes around comes around, and we are the ones to blame if there are negative things happening in our life. To put it in simple terms, if you do good things, then good things are likely to come your way. If you do bad things, then bad things are likely to come your way. The second is one out to live in a way that honors their ancestors. An example is that Filipinos celebrate an annual festival called Undas, or All Saints' Day, to honor and remember their ancestors by bringing food to the cemetery. Undas is a public holiday in the Philippines, observed on November 1 to honor both deceased loved ones as well as saints and martyrs of the Catholic Church. The third is, the world is ordered by heaven, and that if one wishes to have a good life, one must understand that order and live one's life according to it. This means that everything has a reason for being the way it is. Our lives are predetermined, and the best thing we can do to guarantee ourselves a good life is to follow what we believe is our path in life. On the three that I mentioned, these are influenced by the Chinese and Indian traditions. Since then, the Philippines has been a melting pot of many cultures, and the Chinese and Indians are among the people that have contributed to the Philippines. Manuel B.D. identifies six common themes which can be drawn from the great Asian spiritual and intellectual traditions. The first theme is, one can immediately notice that religious thought is intertwined with philosophical and ethical thinking. Religion in Asia is intertwined with philosophy and ethics. This is because the goal of religion is to get us to the truth. Thus, it becomes the point of philosophy and ethics. For example, the origins of Confucianism and the wisdom are rooted in religious nature worship. Buddhist teachings are deeply linked to Hindu philosophies such as yoga and vice versa. In modern times, Islam has influenced region-wide political movements. The second theme is, love and compassion binds these intellectual traditions. Love is a profound sense of emotion and devotion towards someone, whereas compassion is an empathetic pity and care for the sufferings or misfortunes of others, both in which important in traditions because it will act as a binding force for people to connect with each other. The third theme is the connectedness of personal cultivation and social responsibility. In Asian ethical traditions, being a good person means to be a good citizen, and vice versa. Thus, the path of personal cultivation and the path of social responsibility are seen not as two separate paths but two halves of the same path. In the Philippines, mano or pagmamano is one of the ethical tradition that promote the connectedness of personal cultivation and social responsibility. It is an honoring gesture used in Filipino culture, performed as a sign of respect to elders and as a way of requesting a blessing. The fourth theme is enlightenment. Enlightenment is a common theme in Asian ethical traditions because enlightenment is a concept that relates to all of the people. All individuals who have made profound contributions to the world have all sought to reach enlightenment. Being enlightened means truly understanding the true meaning of one's existence, as well as understanding all other forms of life and how they connect together. As a result, when an individual achieves enlightenment, they become more accepting of the world around them. The fifth and final theme is these great teachings offer paths of harmony with oneself, with others, with nature, with a transcendent. These beliefs support the belief that all individuals are connected. A person who lives his life in harmony with himself and with the world around them finds true happiness and peace, rather than a person who lives in disharmony, which will find suffering instead of joy. That is why harmony is an important goal in many Asian traditions.
Now let's talk about Vedas and Upanishads. Vedas and Upanishads are similar in the same manner that you and your arm is similar. Upanishads are part of the bigger body of Vedas, therefore an Upanishad can be a Veda, but a Veda cannot be an Upanishad. Just like your arm can be a human, but a human can't be an arm. The main difference between Vedas and Upanishads is that the Vedas were written to preserve the information about the religious practices, traditions, and philosophical thoughts, whereas Upanishads are written philosophical thoughts of men and women that focus mainly on the enlightenment of spirit. The Vedas, which means knowledge, are the oldest texts of Hinduism. They are derived from the ancient Indo-Aryan culture of the Indian subcontinent and began as an oral tradition that was passed down through generations before finally being written in Vedic Sanskrit between 1500 and 500 BCE or before Common Era. Krita is a concept according to the Vedas, the ancient sacred scriptures of Hinduism. It is the natural order of the universe that governs, for example, the sun and moon making their journeys across the sky, or the regulation of seasons and the rotating order. Logistics of the universal phenomena are under this conception. The Vedas are structured in four different collections containing hymns, poems, prayers, and religious instruction. The Indian caste system is based on a fable from the Vedas about the sacrifice of the deity Purusha. The basic Vedic texts are the Samhita or collections of the four Vedas. The four Vedas are the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. First is Rig Veda. Rig Veda is or the knowledge of the hymns or praise for recitation. Rig Veda is the earliest of the four Vedas and one of the most important texts of the Hindu tradition. It is a large collection of hymns in praise of the gods, which are chanted in various rituals. Next is Samaveda, knowledge of the melodies for chanting. The Samaveda represents the force of spiritual knowledge and the power of devotion. It consists of hymns of the Rig Veda put on musical measure. Hence, the text of the Samaveda is an alternative version of the Rig Veda. The Yajur Veda, knowledge of the sacrificial formulas for liturgy. The Yajur Veda is a Veda primarily of prose mantras for worship rituals, an ancient Vedic Sanskrit text. It is a compilation of ritual offering formulas that were said by a priest while an individual performed ritual actions such as those before the Yajnathar. So last is the Atharva Veda, knowledge of the magic formulas, named after a kind of group of priests. The Atharva Veda is a Vedic collection of spells prayers, charms, and hymns. There are prayers to protect crops from lightning and drought, charm against venomous serpents, love spells, healing spells, hundreds of verses. Some are derived from the Rig Veda over ancient. In general, the Vedas have a strong priestly bias as the priestly class had the monopoly in the edition and transmission of the texts. The Vedas present a multitude of gods, most of them related to natural forces such as storms, fire, and wind. As part of its mythology, Vedic texts contain multiple creation stories, most of them inconsistent with each other. Sometimes the Vedas refer to a particular god as the greatest god of all, and later another god will be regarded as the greatest god of all. The Vedas also have a hymn to Purusha, a primordial deity who is sacrificed by the other gods. Purusha's mind became the moon, his eyes the sun, his head the sky, and his feet the earth. In the same passage, we have one of the first indication of a caste system with its four major divisions. The Brahmas, or priests, came from Purusha's mouth, the Kshatriyas, or warriors rulers, from Purusha's arm, the Vaishyas, or the commoners, or landowners, merchants, and etc., from Purusha's thighs, and the Shodras, or the laborers and servants, from Purusha's feet. Myths are products of beliefs, and beliefs are products of experience. This this story reflects the concerns and experiences of a community based on agricultural lifestyle, where water is seen as one of the most valuable assets. Myths with an agricultural significance are found in many other cultures, and dragon slaying myths are told all over the world, especially in many other Indo-European traditions. Next, slide, next, please. The writers, um, the writers of Upanishads said to understand the fullness of human becoming by realizing the deepest insight about the true nature of the universe. They share a path of spiritual enlightenment. The Upanishads are a collection of texts of religious and philosophical nature, written in India probably between 800 BCE and 500 BCE. During a time when Indian society started to question the traditional Vedic religious order. Some people during this time decided to engage in the pursuit of spiritual progress, living as ascetic hermits, rejecting ordinary material concerns, and giving up family life. Some of their speculations and philosophy were compiled into the Upanishads. There is an attempt in this text to shift the focus of religious life from external rites and sacrifices to internal spiritual quests in the search for answers. The book then contained the thoughts and insights of important spiritual Indian figures. Although we speak of them together as Vedic texts, the Upanishads are not parts of a whole, like chapters in the book. Each of them is complete in itself. Therefore, they represent not a consistent philosophy or worldview, but rather the experiences, opinions, and lessons of many different men and women. The purpose is not so much instruction as inspiration. They are meant to be expounded by an illuminated teacher from the basis of personal experience. In fact, one of the first lessons that we can learn in the Upanishads is that inadequacy of the intellect. Human intellect is not an adequate tool to understand the immense complexity of reality. The Upanishads do not claim that our brain is entirely useless. It certainly has its use. However, when it is used to unlock the great mysteries of life, the eternal, the infinite, then it is simply not enough. The highest understanding, according to this view, comes from direct perception and intuition. Even though the Upanishads do not offer a single comprehensive system of thought, they do develop some basic general principles. Some of these principles are samsara. karma, dharma, and moksha. These principles form a metaphysical scheme which was shared with varying adjustments made by most Indian religions and philosophers. The first idea is the samsara or incarnation. It is the idea that after we die, our soul will be reborn again in another body, perhaps in an animal, perhaps as a human, perhaps as a god, but always in a regular cycle of death and resurrection. Another concept of another concept is karma, which literally means action. The idea that all actions have consequences, good or bad, just like what Torah Gilbert said earlier. Karma determines the condition of the next life, just like our life is conditioned by a previous karma. There is no judgment or forgiveness, simply an impersonal, natural, and eternal law operating in the universe. Those who do good will be reborn in better conditions, while those who are evil will be reborn in worse conditions. The second principle is the Dharma. Dharma means right behavior or duty. The idea that we all have a social obligation. Each member of a specific caste has a particular set of responsibilities, a dharma. For example, among the Kshatriyas, the warrior caste, it was considered a sin to die in bed. Dying the battlefield was the biggest honor they could aim for. In other words, Dharma encouraged people of different social groups to perform their duties the best they could. Another example is when a student studies sincerely, he is practicing Dharma. When a soldier fights for his country, that is his Dharma. When a mother cares for her child, it is her Dharma. And that is the beauty of the Vedic culture. There is no associated expectation that goes with those doing these things. The student doesn't study because he wants to compete or score, but simply because that is what he must do as a student. The same goes for parenting, for marriage, for all facets of life. If we manage to live this way, it will save us from many frustrations in life because our happiness will no longer be dependent on the activities of others. Thank you. The third one is moksha. Moksha means liberation or release. The eternal cycle of death and resurrection can be seen as a pointless repetition with no ultimate goal attached to it. Seeking permanent peace or freedom from suffering seems impossible, for sooner or later we will be reborn in worse circumstances. Moksha is the liberation from this never-ending cycle of reincarnation, a way to escape this repetition. If you want liberation or mukti from all karma and you want full moksha, then you must first become free from ignorance of the soul. Once the ignorance has left, you will find that things will be simpler and straightforward. There will be peace, and day by day you will experience more and more bliss, and you will find freedom from karma. The Upanishads tell us that the core of our own self is not the body or the mind, but Atman or self. Atman is the core of all creatures, their innermost essence. It can only be perceived by direct experience through meditation. It is when we are at the deepest level of our existence. Brahman is the one underlying substance of the universe, the unchanging or absolute being, the intangible essence of the entire existence. It is the undying and unchanging seed that creates and sustains everything. It is beyond all description and intellectual understanding. One of the greatest insights of the Upanishads is that Atman and Brahman are made of the same substance. When a person achieves moksha or liberation, Atman returns to Brahman, to the source, like a drop of water returning to the ocean. The Upanishads claim that it is an illusion that we are all separate. With this realization, we can be freed from ego, from reincarnation, and from the suffering we experience during our existence. Moksha, in a sense, means to be absorbed into Brahman, into the greatest world soul. So, how is moksha achieved? If your good deeds outweigh your bad ones, then the soul is liberated from the eternal cycle of birth and rebirth. There are many ways, there are other many ways in which, according to the Upanishads, we can achieve moksha. First is meditation, introspection, and also from the knowledge that behind all forms and wills, the subjective and objective are one, that we are all part of the whole. In general, the Upanishads agree on the idea that men are naturally ignorant about the ultimate identity between Atman, the self within, and Brahman. One of the goals of meditation is to achieve this identification with Brahman and abandon the ignorance that arises from the identification with the illusory or quasi-illusory nature of the common sense world. Here we can see how the religious mystical principles of Indian philosophy can be the foundation of ethics. The next reporter will be Andrea.
Next is Buddhism. Next slide, please. Buddhism, born from the enlightenment of Gautama Buddha, who lived between the 6th and 4th before Common Era. Gautama wandered for 7 years and finally sat down under a peepal tree till he got enlightenment. After 7 days of enlightenment, he renamed the Bodhi tree and began to teach and to share his new understanding and came to be known as Buddha. He discovered that enlightenment and salvation could be achieved in ordinary human if people are enlightened about the nature of suffering. And people need to realize from four truths called Chatvari Arya Satyani. Next slide, please. Chatvari Arya Satyani. So the first truth is life is suffering or dukkha. Humans are born into a world of suffering. Birth is suffering, disease, old age, decay, and death are suffering. Life is full of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Not getting what one's desires is suffering. Being exposed to unpleasantness is suffering. Being cut off from desired objects and pleasures is suffering. And making us sometimes wish we had not been born is also suffering. Life always involves suffering in obvious and subtle forms. Even when things seems good, we always feel an undercurrent of anxiety and uncertainty inside. The second truth is action or karma is the cause of this suffering. Karma refers to good or bad actions a person takes during his or her lifetime. Good actions, which involve either the absence of bad actions or actual positive acts such as generosity, righteousness, and meditation. It brings about long term happiness. While the bad actions such as lying, stealing, or killing brings about long term unhappiness. The third truth, there is an end to suffering, and the path beyond suffering is to transcend this illusion and enter the state of nirvana. As we are the ultimate cause of our difficulties, we are also the solution. We cannot change the things that happens to us, but we can change our responses by transforming ourselves or our minds. Transformation of the mind cannot be achieved without realizing the true nature of life. Everything in the universe is in the process of constant change. We can then let go of things that have caused us a lot of disappointment and anger. Our pride, arrogance, and vanity will vanish. And through this, we can enter the state of nirvana. Nirvana, it means happiness and peace. The fourth truth is how human beings ought to live a life free from suffering. Buddha emphasized that we are responsible for our own happiness. He taught methods through which we can transform ourselves into a joyful, pure, and wholesome person. One of his methods is the 8 paths leading to the end of suffering. Next slide. 8 elements of the path. Number 1 is correct view. It is an accurate understanding of the nature of things, specifically the Four Noble Truths. Number 2, correct intention. Avoiding thoughts of attachments, hatred, and harmful speech, harmful intent. And the third one, correct speech. Refraining from verbal misdeeds such as lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and senseless speech. Number 4, correct action. Refraining from physical misdeeds such as killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Number 5, correct livelihood. Avoiding trades that directly or indirectly harm others, such as selling slaves, weapons, animals for slaughter, intoxicants, or poison. Number 6, correct effort. Abandoning negative states of mind that have already arisen, preventing negative states that have yet to arise, and sustaining positive states that have already arisen. Number 7, correct mindfulness. It is awareness of body, feelings, thoughts, and phenomena. And 8, correct concentration. It is a natural ability that everyone has, and everyone can get increasingly better at it. That's all. Next reporter.
Now, let's proceed to Chinese philosophy and Confucian ethics. Next, Confucian ethics is not only or primary form of Chinese ethics. Chinese ethics are conventional in the sense that they are learned by example rather than being imposed by either law or religious authority. There are Taoist and legalist Chinese schools of thought that contribute equally to the development of traditional Chinese people's conception of the good. Next, please. Confucianism is a system of thought attributed to the teacher Kong Qi, known in the West as Confucius. The Confucian ethical tradition is entirely secular. The dominant ethical tradition of China, Japan, Korea, and of the Chinese communities of Southeast Asia, Confucianism has its roots in an ancient Chinese ethical tradition, but one that was reworked and revitalized by the critical writings of Confucius and his followers from the late 6th to the late 3rd centuries before Christ era. Two central and defining characteristics of Chinese ethics, both before and after Confucius, are that they are social or relational and conventional. They are social in the sense that the ethical norms focus on the conduct of relationships rather than the behavior or attitudes of individuals. Ethics are concerned not so much with how people should behave in general as with how they should behave in specific roles and relationships. For example, how a son should behave towards his father, a father towards his son, a ruler towards his subject, and so on. The central relationship are those of the family, but the ethics developed in that context also act as a basis for the ethics appropriate to other, less intimate relationships. Next, Confucius was an aspiring civil servant who lived with his life as a teacher of governance and ethics, ritual, and was able to gather a following around him. Confucius himself seems to have been a religious believer, but this did not mark his teachings and the ethical system named after him. In practice, combined with a variety of religious beliefs, including Buddhism and Shinto, as well as with atheistic and agnostic tendencies. Confucius' main preoccupation was the possibility of building a harmonious, ordered society, and the right way is not in harmony, nature, but membership in a morally good society that offered the best way to live. Confucianism embraces the idea that to be ethical is to be human in the best or most perfect sense in which that is possible. This is also what makes learning, the basis of a conventional ethics, is so important, and what underlies the critical aspect of Confucianism is to be truly human, is to learn as only humans can from one's predecessors, to subject this learning as only humans can to rational critique, and to exercise as only humans can and one's human-heartedness. The substance of Confucian ethics has to do with the management of relationships and with the duties attendant on one's particular role and in particular relationships. This focus leads, among other things, to an emphasis upon trust and trustworthiness, and to the prioritizing of relationships of trust over those in which there is no basis for trust. Confucius took his inspiration for building just a kingdom from ancient sage rulers. The Duke of Zhou believed that heaven bestows the divine right of ruling to those who are morally worthy. This belief is known as Mandate of Heaven. Mandate of Heaven, it is a sanction of heaven granted to a ruler. This mandate imposed a certain benefits and duties on a ruler. The main benefit was increased authority and social force it gave to the ruler. Confucius taught people the way to bear the order of heaven in one's conduct. In heaven refers to the cosmos above the earth, and especially the moral laws inherent in the universe to which human beings must submit in order to live excellent lives. Confucius' teachings place an enormous emphasis on trustworthiness. Repeatedly, we get stories in which the conventional virtues response in criticized in favor of a broader view in which someone, usually a leader, acts so as to build trust in the future. Trustworthiness is, of course, a relational concept. You cannot be trustworthy by yourself, but only in the eyes of other people. It is also subtle and nuanced quality you cannot apply to try to be trustworthy as you might try to be obedient or loving. You have to think through quite carefully the consequences of your actions and how other people will respond to them. And you have to set the particular issue with which you are concerned. The management of particular relationship in particular circumstances in a wider context. What matters in Confucian ethics is that you do the right thing in situation as a whole in the broader context. That's all.
Moving on to the wisdom. The wisdom is a philosophy, a religion, and a way of life that arose in the 6th century BCE in what is now the eastern Chinese province of Henan. It has strongly influenced the culture and religious life of China and other East Asian countries ever since. A follower of this philosophy is called a Taoist and reflects on an ancient Chinese system of beliefs composed of many different stands. The wisdom puts more emphasis on the opening to the Tao. This is because it seeks to help people to achieve immortality rather than the ways of the state, the family, and the rulers. The opening of the Tao is described as a place where one can find serenity and harmony, achieve enlightenment, and develop themselves to a higher level of being. The wisdom's main concern is for human beings to reach human fullness by living in attunement with the Tao, which includes having spiritual freedom from the ordinary world. This is the reason why the wisdom is more concerned with the creation of just, humane, and well-ordered society. Individuals living in attunement to the Tao are free from everyday concerns and are at peace with themselves, others, and nature. Asian ethical traditions promote the idea of living in harmony with the rest of the universe. The Venus and Upanishads, Buddhism, Confucianism, and the wisdom are the Asian traditions that promote peace, love, and unity to people. Their main concern is how to live a good life and be a good person by gaining an insight into the transcendent and eternal order of the universe, and from that insight, how to attune one's life to that order. Asian ethical systems are less about becoming an autonomous, rational legislator of one's own laws. They are about engaging with established guidelines for living in order to realize one's human potential and fit into the world like a jigsaw piece by articulating human connectedness and oneness. Asian ethics is based on self-cultivation, as Sawat mentioned earlier, but not self-creation or following one's own lights. It is a matter of coming to conform to the proper fit rather than choosing and legislating the proper fit by following one's reason and inclinations. And that would be all for the Asian ethical traditions.